welcome to the CoinScore Show. My name is Luke, and this is John, one of our lead analysts. Today we're going to be talking about the US dollar Tether system, which has been all the news lately on Twitter. I think a lot of crypto Twitter has been really following the impact that that sort of announcement has had recently. Some developments have been made. Don here, answer some questions that I'm sure you guys have. I have as well. So,
all right.
Don, let's kick it off.
You bet. Thanks.
So first of all, I wanted to get talking about where we came from and when we decided to score Tether itself. This is something that a lot of coins around the world are coming out, and how do you make sense of it all? I mean, really, how do you tell what's different, and where does Tether fit into that mix?
Right. Well, you know, with the CoinScore platform, what it started with was the notion that we could provide a methodology to do some due diligence, right? So we came up with a methodology that we could apply to coins and help investors make sense of which coins are really great tech, really great ideas, really great team. You know, somewhere in the middle there's people that aren't that great a team, but they have great ideas. And then down at the bottom, it's maybe bad ideas or simply outright frauds, right? And so we saw a lot of that and we wanted to create a systematic way to be able to go through coins and evaluate. And you know, at the time, we wanted to look at a lot of more popular coins, and Tether is one of those.
Absolutely. And I mean, with all the coins in there, have you noticed any trends? I mean, like obviously with BitConnect recently, I noticed that had made a lot of news and kind of rated that relatively low on the scale.
That's right.
Have you seen other coins like that sort of come through in the fruition? I mean, Tether itself isn't really an investment model, but you know, where do these sort of things fit in the ecosystem?
Well, so with Tether, we didn't score that very strongly at all either, right? There's been questions, doubts. You know, their white paper is solid, and they point out some good things, but you know, certainly BitConnect was one that we recognized right out of the gate as bad, and you know, it's actually a functioning blockchain, so it has elements that would generate a score, but it scored 35%. So you know, and then we hopefully provided some clarity around when we discussed why it was a scam, laid it out, pretty straightforward, right? But you know, there's other coins that, you know, certainly done very well. They have really strong tech. You know, IOTA scores very well. You know, on our coin, certainly Bitcoin does okay. Ethereum does even better. You know, So you know, and you know, just because the score just talks about some of the controls around it, right? And yeah, you know, those are the types of things that we're trying to help people separate the wheat from the chaff.
Absolutely, and it's something that the market probably really needs right now. I mean, there's a lot of new investors and such. But moving back towards Tether specifically, there's a lot of talk about the concept of a stable coin. Would you be able to potentially elaborate that? I don't know, for the audience here.
Right. So stable coin, kind of think about central banks. They have central banks in smaller countries have. Sometimes they have currency pegs. Sometimes they have with the US dollar, perhaps, or they have floating currency regimes where they try to keep it within a band, right? So they're managing the value of their currency relative to another currency, right? And so a stable coin, in and of itself, is actually a very important thing to provide to the market, right? So what they do is they offer electronic units of you know, cryptocurrency that are backed fully by whether it's some kind of fiat currency, right? So whether it's US dollar, yen, whatever, right? And so they act as a bridge, right? They can custody in an omnibus account. They can custody all of the US dollars and then exchange those one for one, and that way those stable coins act as basically bearer bonds. And then you can go out there and trade them with anybody who wants those electronic versions, and it's a great bridge, great on-ramp to get fiat value into the cryptocurrency system.
So you mentioned that it's a great on-ramp for the fiat to crypto conversion. What are the primary uses for this? I mean, like, why is the coin like such as Tether taking off in popularity right now? Is there a specific need for that in the marketplace?
Absolutely. You know, so it is the part of the complexity, right? Is you have to go to let's say Coinbase, right? Hook up your bank account, You got to make those transactions. Those can be expensive, time-consuming. Then you're opening up your own account there, and those kind of services aren't free. Right? It's much cheaper. Think of it. It's almost like PayPal. PayPal has the reason that their services are so cheap and fast and easy, right? Because they have one bank account, and when I open up my account, they don't have in the name of Don Yocham and certain dollars set aside like that. They just hold a pool of U.S. dollars, and they know that some of those are mine, right? And that's effectively what you can do with a stable coin. So it's cheap and easy and efficient, right? If they can establish the right banking relationships, and that way you can just move more money easily into the system. And then from there, you've got something that, if they run it right, you have that stable coin that maintains the value against whatever fiat currency that they need, and it's an easy way then to exchange dollar wanting, crypto having, or vice versa.
Yes, absolutely. So, it sounds relatively simple, in terms of concept, but it's really been the talk of the crypto Twitter space, or just on all social media right now. Why are people, do you think, moving towards a more conscious stance towards these, and specifically Tether itself?
Well, so there are a few reasons, right? So and Tether in and of itself, right? So they recognize the need for periodic audits, right? So blockchain solutions, sometimes all of the accountability can be inside of the solution, right? All of the checks and balances. A DAO is an organization, the whole concept, nobody's really got it right yet, but it's a concept where you can technically do the voting and the paying of bills, and all that stuff can be thorough and objective, right? But there's other solutions, that are only halfway solutions, and those are fine, and that's where Tether is, right? So they have this blockchain solution that can identify the number of Tether that they granted, right? That's what they issue when they issue new Tether. They call them grants, right? And so you can validate all of that, but you can't validate how much, through the blockchain, how much dollars are actually sitting in the bank account. So they recognize the need for an audit. They called it out in their white paper, right? Yeah. It's been 2 years. Audits, when you go through and count the number of dollars, is a pretty straightforward thing to do, and they have yet to produce an audit. Right? So that's certainly one big area that starts to cast it down. It makes people doubt what's actually going on. Sure. Do they know what they're doing? Are they running it right? Just a matter of confidence. Then there's also certainly lots of other people pointing out there's a fair amount of statistical correlation, it seems like, between when Bitcoin sells off, there's a surge in Tether issuance, and then Bitcoin price reacts once those Tethers are granted. Excuse me. So all of those things, that could be totally natural, and we'll talk about all of those specific things. But then they start to wonder, given the phenomenal increase in Tether, particularly from the end of September to now, are there actually even dollars backing those? And because they've fallen on the first promise, there's reason to believe that, and not necessarily arm's length relationships with exchange, then that just casts doubts on the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And obviously, this has been something that has popped up in a lot of blogs, a lot of subreddits specifically. But if you could, please expand on the fact that this is being printed. Are there independent researchers working to sort of sift through this? Because to a lot of people I know, it probably sounds like a conspiracy. There's a lot of things in crypto that you're not really sure that you trust sometimes, even though it's a trust-based system in a sense. So is there anything to back that up?
Oh, there is. Okay. And let's first off start with, that they promised audits, they haven't delivered audits, bad.
Big red flag.
That's right, big red flag, and if you have a business process in mind, prudent, that's not the direction that you need to be putting your money. Right? You don't need to trust that type of a system. From there you can start to do, and we actually the article that we just wrote, and we refer to a statistical report with a lot of statistical analysis, right? And so the elements that people have curiosity about is why is there so much Tether grants around sell-offs in Bitcoin? Why is there a significant price response to Bitcoin after that Tether issuance? And how much of that can be explained? And then further, is there a way to indicate that maybe that issuance isn't actually backed by natural dollar flows? Right? So those are the things that are really the core of everybody's arguments and concerns.
Yeah.
And the report that we reference in our article does a really good job of talking about those points. So I can walk through those.
Absolutely. And for people watching, that was tetherreport.com?
That's right, tetherreport.com.
Perfect.
Yes. Yeah. And so, yeah, I'll talk about it. What they do specifically is, first off, if you look at the time periods prior to Tether grant issuance, is there a very significant sell-off? Do those correlate very significantly with sell-offs in Bitcoin, with price declines? And there is a huge correlation, very significant relationship between sell-offs in Bitcoin and issuance of Tether. Now, that in and of itself isn't necessarily a red flag. It could just mean somebody with pretty deep pockets, or a lot of different people are really good at timing.
Exactly.
And they simply look for sell-offs in Bitcoin to get their Tether, and then go ahead and turn that into Bitcoin on exchange their US dollar Tether for Bitcoin on exchange, right? Begs the question, if somebody wants to sit there and be ready, why they wouldn't just go ahead and have a bunch of Tethers, and then they could do the same thing. But nonetheless, maybe that's how they choose to operate, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. The second part then is, what is the Bitcoin's price reaction to the issuance of Tether? And so this report also takes a look at that period subsequent to those grants, and finds a very high correlation between the price response and the period following USDT grants and the way it would move on to the exchanges. Then they go ahead and look at how much of that price is explained by those periods. And fully, so basically from the end of April, I believe, is when they looked, and there was over 40% of the return that Bitcoin has received over that time has been during those 2-hour periods. So if you were to remove those 2-hour blocks, right, then Bitcoin would be 40% lower, 40-50% lower, and that the rest of that ignores the knock-on effects. But there is much more of the price reaction after those grant issuance, and I believe it's a 2-hour block, than there is any other time. Right? So that's a lot of explanatory power in the price of Bitcoin.
So maybe not causation, but serious correlation to add to the growing number of red flags.
That's right.
Being seen in Tether.
That's right.
Have you been seeing any indication that people are starting to catch on to this, or has any news sort of gathered? I know that they were subpoenaed.
Right? So subpoenas, certainly mean people are starting to take a look, right?
Absolutely.
Then, of course, they had this, what they called a good faith representation of audit in September.
Okay.
Of course, that was by no means an audit. And then that relationship, they just fired their auditor. So that's always a bad sign. I think around Enron, WorldCom, lots of those kind of relationships were severed when people found out that the books are not the way they should be. So it's just another red flag. But then I think, in this same analysis that we referred to, there is the last question, right? So it could be that people are genuinely timing the time that they contribute dollars to receive Tether with Bitcoin price declines, and they're buying the dip, and then Bitcoin responds positively, and there could be a significant price response. So that just means a lot of smart money is buying the dips, and it's driving the price up. But then the question is, okay, because of all these other issues, and the phenomenal increase in USDT, right, which is the US dollar Tether, are there ways that we can see if that issuance is actually backed by real dollars? And so here's where they do a great job of doing some forensic accounting. They apply analysis to the pattern of the amounts of flows from the Tether USDT into the exchange wallets. And normally, the the amounts of those flows follow a natural pattern, and it tends to be more smaller denominations than there are. So like things with a leading of a 1, 2, or 3, then you have 8s and 9s, and a lot of audits are performed, like the IRS, based on violations of those principles, because then they can see that it's not normal, natural flows. And those flows violate that principle. So it looks as though those are not natural US dollar flows, and so that's another reason to believe that they may not necessarily be backed. And so, yeah, there's a whole host of things, and even if you can't prove it all with the blockchain, you still can't run from statistics and accounting. All of that stuff is out there. So, particularly with the blockchain, pretty readily available. So, yeah, it looks pretty rough. So we'll see how that works out for them.
This seems like a good concept, but I mean, obviously a troubled past and a lot of red flags. I mean, from early last year into late last year, now to this sort of stuff going on, it's something that we definitely need to be watching, especially because I mean there are really wide-ranging implications to this sort of crisis of confidence.
Absolutely, right. They may not have just shot themselves in the foot, but maybe a lot of other people that trusted that system too. So we'll see what the ultimate knock-on effects are. Hard to say, but yeah, the concept is great. We need it. I think there are a lot of things in the pipe that are going to provide that solution. Absolutely, there are honest and value-oriented people that are going to find a solution. It's a very straightforward solution. But for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like they could execute on it.
So I guess like the big question that everyone's trying to figure out right now is, what would be the potential implications of a crisis of confidence in a Tether system, if you would?
Well, so if the issuance of USDT drove 40% of the price rise directly of Bitcoin, right? And even more because of a knock-on effect of exuberance and momentum and that sort of thing. And it turns out that creation was actually counterfeit. Right? So that's the accusation, right? The thought. That's the fear. Is it actually are they counterfeiting USDT? And so if that momentum and that bid all the way up was caused by something that wasn't real, well then that bid goes away, right? And what you have is USDT aren't worth $1 because there may not be enough dollars to actually redeem and collect, right? So that's where that we didn't really talk about that, but the ability of these basically bearer bonds is that you have these tethers out there, and you can in turn just turn around and redeem them. So you can call the value, right? If USDT declines too much, then you can redeem dollars and get something worth $1. So there's that mechanism back and forth of being able to redeem dollars for the tether or any other fiat currency. Well, if everybody tries to redeem it and there's not enough there, that's a downward pressure on the price. And there's those mechanisms ultimately mean that whether it's Bitcoin or it's not necessarily a bullish indicator for Bitcoin by any stretch.
But for sure. And
it's self-feeding. It's a self-reinforcing cycle on the way up, and those things reverse themselves. Right?
Absolutely. So. And this is something that touches a lot of extremities in the Bitcoin ecosystem, or altcoins in general. I mean, this is a major trading pair we're talking about.
That's right.
At least Bitfinex or Binance. I mean, these are major exchanges that are using a fair volume of USDT to back up their trading pairs. So
that's right.
Do you think that would have any effect on the market on the whole?
So yeah, there's a lot of positive feedback loops in the system of Bitcoin being the first and the biggest, and its price appreciation, and then that leading to easier ways of getting into some of these altcoins. Same with Ethereum, right? It's had a huge move. It's used in a lot of these ICOs, so there's that kind of creates the ability to fund these other coins in and of themselves. Interesting. I think I just saw it today. Year to date, Ethereum is up 30%, right? While Bitcoin is down 30%. So that's a nice divergence. Like there's not all this tremendous interdependence, right? It's a near-term indication, but at least it's kind of refreshing to see that. There's certainly some knock-on knee-jerk reactions that affect the whole space, like anything. But the full impact of let's say a USDT unwind and its impact on Bitcoin. It's hard to say exactly how that would affect all of them, but there has to be some. There has to be some. Yeah.
For sure. And there's no way you can have a crystal ball. I mean, everything you think you know and you can apply to crypto, 9 times out of 10 seems to be wrong.
And emotion, who knows? People may not care, right? So the with Tether, that it doesn't. Somebody could have a stable coin and state that they're not going to be fully backed.
Yeah.
They could prove what they're going to do with the funds that aren't backing the coin. Usually, it's something to add value. That's actually the way banks work.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that fractional reserve banking in and of itself is necessarily bad things. Don't flood me because I'm a free market guy. But that's a choice. People can know going into a situation that we're going to have a fractional reserve system.
Yeah.
You can trust us or not, but if you buy into it, this is what we're going to do, and we can prove what we do with the funds that aren't that we get in excess of what we use to reserve it. It's if you want to operate that way, that's fine. But that's not how they said they were going to operate. And it doesn't seem that's right, and that's the key. That's the key. And so trustless in blockchain doesn't mean hey trust me, good take me on my good faith.
Yeah.
It means you kind of really got to prove it one way or the other.
So as I mentioned, we can't possibly have a crystal ball. We can't really see more than like a week ahead in this space very adequately. But I know that there's a market for stablecoins right now. It's there's obviously a need, as you illustrated. And do you think that if there were a crisis of confidence in the Tether system, would this impact in a negative way potential other stablecoins that Trust Coin or Base Coin or new projects coming up, trying to fill that void in the market space?
Well, hopefully what it would do is there's a need for it, and people would recognize they would look hard at the solutions, and if those solutions are really tight and reliable, then that's the way for people to exercise it. But the unfortunate part is it just kind of casts doubt, right? And it's just one more thing that people aren't sure of, and there's a lot of people in this space that aren't exactly sure what they're doing and why. And so it's moved. There's a lot of people that really do know, but there's a fair amount, that are just kind of along for the ride, and so they don't really know how to question something else that comes along. And if it gets, if it's just another stable coin, they're not going to know what they really need to know in order to trust that system. But hopefully, those other solutions, can really fill the gap that needs to be filled with these sorts of stablecoins.
So bottom line, do your own research.
Do your research. Look to a CoinScore platform to get some of the information and analytics. And certainly watch your six out there.
Absolutely. Anything you would like to add on the end of that?
Or? No. Hey, I appreciate it. Check out the article. It's what was the name of it? I forgot what enough tether to hang yourself. Check it out on our blog, and we'll appreciate the chance to talk to everybody about what we found.
Well, thank you, Don. It's been extremely interesting for I think all of us, and this is going to answer a lot of the questions that people seem to be having right now.
Thanks, Luke.